Hi, my name is Daisy, and today I will be talking about the duality of spectacle and secrecy of the KKK. I would like to start off with a really short quote by Shelby Foote. They burn crosses every night around us, and a man who burns what they pray to, they'll burn anything. Shelby Foote was an American writer, journalist, historian, and novelist. The picture on the right is what I plan to use as an artifact. The image of the Klan burning the cross was taken on January 30th in the year 1939 in Tampa, Florida. The KKK typically burned crosses at lynchings and next to houses as forms of intimidation methods. Cross burnings had many implications on society. As I stated before, they were used as intimidation methods on minority groups who the Klan wanted to scare away. RAV versus St. Paul in 1982, along with Virginia versus Black in 2003, were famous landmark cases where the legality of burning classes was challenged. Ultimately, the burning of crosses held up in court as a form of free speech protected by the First Amendment of the Constitution. The research question that I will be studying in this presentation will be what role does secrecy play in forming the hate group's identity? I will be using the social identity theory first coined by Henry Tajfel and John Turner. This theory can be summarized into two different categories: the difference between groups and the similarities of people in the same group. The theory focuses on how we identify with people in the groups we consider ourselves to be a part of and the implications and consequences that these actions have. First, I will give a brief history over the KKK, and then I will go into more in-depth explanation of the social identity theory. This is followed up with the communication methods that the KKK typically resorted to. I will then apply the social identity theory model to my artifact, and then I will discuss the effectiveness of the methods, and finally, I'll talk about the implications it has had on society. Starting out with the history of the KKK, it was founded in 1866 in the South by 6 former Confederate soldiers who were angered by the newly freed African Americans after the Civil War. They made up the secret society and had secret symbols, handshakes, and even their own alphabet. They would engage in night riding, lynching, and racial violence towards African Americans and other minority groups. The violence got so bad that the Enforcement Acts of 1870 and 71 federally outlawed racial violence. The Klan eventually dispersed, and as we will see later on in this presentation, this is typical of the Klan as it is categorized in movements of high group membership and low group membership. The Klan later was banded together by the Birth of a Nation film in 1915. This film reached approximately 25 million people and was considered Americans' first blockbuster. The film painted African Americans as being murderous, and they claimed that African Americans wanted to take over the South. It was especially influenced by a man by the name of William Joseph Simmons. Simmons was an American preacher who founded the revival of the second KKK. Simmons organized a group to climb Stone Mountain, burn a cross, and welcome new members of the KKK. Cross burning had not been originally derived from the first KKK. Simmons got the idea from the film The Birth of a Nation. His influence ended when he publicly denounced racial violence. In addition, Indiana Grand Dragon David Stevenson was found guilty of murder and rape of a woman. People around America found themselves disassociating with the Klan after the scandal because one of the principles of the Klan is to protect the sanctity of women, and Stevenson failed to do so. The Klan was on the rise again after the landmark case Brown versus Board of Education, which claimed that segregation was illegal. There were 530 cases of violence, along with 27 bombings. Later on, this hate was further fueled by the running of candidate John F. Kennedy, who was from a Catholic family and wanted to integrate minority groups further into society. In 1965, Lyndon Johnson publicly condemned the Klan after a white female civil rights worker in Alabama was murdered by the Klan. This was one of the most famous incidents where public opinion was again turned away from the KKK. These scattered clans later turned into hate groups. However, many people still identify with the Klan. The next thing I want to talk about is the social identity theory. The social identity theory is a person's knowledge that he or she belongs to a social category or group. People who we consider similar to the self are in the in group, while persons who differ are considered as being on the out group. We categorize groups based on attitudes, beliefs, values, behavioral norms, speech, physical appearances, and more. All of these categorizations create an us versus them mentality. John Turner and Henry Todgefell explained that the people derive their identity from the social categories they place themselves in. Often, group members in the in group will try to find negative elements of an out group in order to enhance their self image and feel better about themselves. There are 3 processes that occur when we evaluate other people. The first process is social categorization, which involves something as simple as categorizing ourselves as being different from different ethnic groups. This is a completely normal process as it is a great way to get to know ourselves better. The second process is social identification, where we actively adopt the identity of the group we have placed ourselves in. In this process, we begin acting like we think one should act in the group we are in. Finally, the third process is social comparison. In this stage, we often compare ourselves to other groups to feed our self-esteem. Competition often arises because of resources and competing identities. When you identify with the group, you have a more positive evaluation of the group. You are less willing to leave, which also increases commitment. There is possibility for groupthink, and it is also the basis for all social movements. This theory is used by scholars to try and explain racial prejudices, stereotyping, and more. The communications methods that the KKK employed included secret handshakes and passwords that have been around since the beginning of the formation of the Klan, along with night rides, Klan meetings, and rallies. As mentioned, cross burning originated in the 1920s with the birth of a nation. Night rides evolved to car rides with banners inciting violence. The 1960s brought about a wave of violence which included lynching, kidnapping, and mutilation. There was a torching of minority businesses in order to strike fear in victims. Klan members had also just left the war with the knowledge of how to bomb. There were many church bombings, such as the 16th Baptist Church Street bombing. In addition, lynchings reignited. There's also Klan literature left on doorsteps in order to recruit new members while also striking fear in the minorities that receive the literature. Cross burnings are also known as a circle of fire, where they are united as one. There is uniformity within the group that further brings them together, and ultimately it is also a bonding experience for the group. I will now apply the social identity theory to my artifact. I chose this specific model because I wanted to explore how big spectacles and secrecies, 2 very paradoxical ideas, work together to form a group's identity. This theory is an excellent way to show how prejudices are formed and how big spectacles, such as my artifact, work together with secrecy to create a unique identity like the KKK's. The first process in the theory is social categorization. The members of the KKK know that they are different from minorities. In fact, that is their biggest pride, thinking they are superior simply because the color of their skin is lighter than their victims. In addition, many of them resent foreigners because they want to preserve their cultural norms, behaviors, and practices. Many members believe that African Americans had different values and only wanted to cause harm to people. All these perceived cultural and social differences cause the members to focus on the differences between them and everyone else who was not like them. Members of the KKK consisted of Caucasian males, both educated and non-educated, of Protestant beliefs, and who identified as being heterosexual. The next step is social identification, where you begin acting how you think you should act in a specific group. In this case, it is the KKK. The group often engages in scare tactics such as night riding, cross burnings, and lynchings. As stated before, these acts bring these members together and further unify their bond as one. The group sees engaging in these acts such as these as bonding experiences, as they're asserting their dominance over minorities in the face of the law. These grand spectacles, such as the artifact, assert their dominance, which is how the group is thought and thinks is how they should act. Shared beliefs often arise as a result of these grand spectacles, as they are taught to regard minorities' lives as being meaningless. The final process of the theory is social comparison. This is where they compare themselves to minorities. The numbers that the KKK usually had were relatively large compared to their victims. This allowed them to compare themselves and make them think they were bigger than they actually were. Many of the people who joined felt that they had no control over the influx of immigration, and the control that the Klan gave them restored a portion of that control while making them think they were better. In addition, the secret rituals they employed, along with their secret alphabet, handshakes, and passwords, created a sense of exclusivity. Members wanted to stand out from minorities, and this was an excellent way of proving themselves that only the best could join and engage in these practices and that they were truly a superior race. The next thing I would like to discuss is the effectiveness of the Klan's communication methods. They were very effective in reaching out to people. In fact, 5 million new members had joined the Klan by 1925. The 1920s even brought about less reliance on their traditional hooded cloaks. Tyler and Clark were famous promoters of the Klan. They had a strategy to divide segments of the population and try to convert them to the Klan. By 1922, they had more than 1 million new members. However, Klan membership did decline by 1955 through 1965 because brutal images of their racial violence turned public opinion against them, as well as the fact that the Klan began killing Caucasian people who did not believe in their cause. The appropriateness of these communication methods is very subjective. To the rest of the world, many people turned a blind eye, while others publicly denounced them and their methods. Members of the Klan believed that they had to preserve the nation at any cost despite their Protestant beliefs. The 1960s marked the most violent era, and they even went after women and children. In conclusion, these methods were not considered ethical by the rest of the world, but they were widely accepted by the Klan. The methods were ignored for the most part by the public. However, they also reached a point where they grew frustrated by their methods. Ultimately, they ended up doing more harm than good, as their victims often decided to stay in retaliation to their communication methods. Finally, I would like to talk about the implications on society. The first implication is that we are bound to categorize ourselves in different social groups, and we might even find ourselves comparing our group to a different one. However, we must not let ourselves get carried away by our differences. One positive effect of the ritual of cross burning is that it creates group cohesion and forms a certain type of unitary bond within that group. However, there is a huge negative effect that arose from this artifact. There is a malicious intent to scare minorities away from the areas, and it encouraged the belief that some ethnic groups are superior than others. Furthermore, in this presentation, I explained the social identity theory by John Turner and Henry Tajfel. Then I discussed the communication methods employed by the KKK. I then applied the social identity theory to my artifact and explained how secrecy and spectacle play a huge part in forming the hate group's identity. Finally, I discussed the implications the methods had on society. Shelby Foote makes a good note of how these members lost themselves in their group identity. They sacrificed their Protestant beliefs and disrespectfully burned crosses while also going against teachings in their holy book. We should always remember to take precautions when identifying with groups, and remember to stand for something or fall for anything. Thank you.